Okay, well, I will get started. As I said, for the sake of time, thank you for those of you that have joined us today. I'll watch for the waiting room if anybody else pops in, but this will be recorded and disseminated for folks that got pulled away or are on very well-deserved vacations or times out of the office today, as we do find ourselves in the middle of July. So as you can see in front of you, our goal is accomplishing session 10 out of our 12 session series on early childhood mental health for the Building Strong Foundations project. And today our title is Seeing Beneath the Behavior, Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Informed Observation and Assessment. And we'll talk about that for the next hour. This is just a note that we're recording, which I believe I already shared, and we'll have a playlist of these available that Haley puts up on the Board of Union County's YouTube playlist available for folks. And just thank you to Haley and Randy and the team at the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Union County for partnering with UConn and my team. It's been an honor to get to bring some time to focus on these very specific topics within the field of infant and early childhood mental health, which, as you all know, it spills into many other genres, be it early intervention, education, et cetera. And also, even if you're in the mental health field specifically, is something that you really have to seek out as sort of specialty knowledge and support. So I'm happy to have these discussions with you over the course of our several months together. This is just for many of you have seen this before, but if anybody is new or dialing in and watching this recording for the first time, as I said just a moment ago, this is number 10, so observation and assessments that we're doing today, but really sort of out of a 12 session series on sort of major topics when you think about the concepts behind infant and early childhood mental health. So starting with attachment, going through sort of how do we understand or reframe behavior in young childhood, understanding trauma, reflective practice for adults, the impact of caregivers, and including fathers and grandled families in that consideration. In May, we talked about developmental differences. In June, we talked about relationships in early care settings. So really the idea of how do we extend and consider the importance of relationships between adults and kids, and between adults and families for kids in group and educational care. And then in the end of July, we'll meet again to talk about early language and social development. And then we'll close at the beginning of August with a focus on regulation in early childhood. So again, just a series of key themes with the intention of some of you may just have the opportunity to dial into all of these, and some of you may dial in based on your specific alignment based on your role or interest with the given topic. For those of you that haven't, or I haven't had the opportunity to introduce myself to you previously, my name is Kate Sweeney. I'm a clinical social worker by training, and since getting that degree from the University of Maryland in 2009, have focused my career in this work in infant and early childhood mental health in a range of settings as the work happens. So I've done this work within a mental health clinic for very young kids, within an early Head Start, within primary care settings and educational settings, and now through the School of Social Work, get to work on projects where teams are trying to increase their knowledge and application of infant mental health within their settings. So I get to do a lot of this work and consider myself very lucky to do so. Our goal for today is really to sort of look at observation and assessment in the lens of infant and early childhood mental health, so that we're really going to be talking about this in not a traditional sort of assessment training. And here's a screener, here's how to use it, here's how to include what you see in front of you. Much less of a sort of medical approach to that, and taking much more of an observation as relationship-based practice approach, which again, very much aligns with infant and early childhood mental health. The idea that the person that might have years of clinical or developmental experience is going to know less observing a child at this age group for 10 minutes than the person that has a deeper relationship with them. And that our relationship with them can really inform what we're seeing and how we're interpreting a given moment or interaction or behavior, and that can go both in supportive of our understanding of the child and our relationship with them, or detrimental if we're applying our own judgments or biases or difficulty with that relationship with the child. So often, a lot of the work and planning around this it's gonna be relationship based, as is all early childhood work, really. If you learn one or two things from this series, hopefully that's one of them. But our overall objectives for this next little bit of time, you'll see detailed on the right. So describe the purpose of observation and assessment within an infant and early childhood mental health informed approach. Discuss how to interpret cues, behaviors, and relationships through a relationship-based lens within young kids. Identify how tools such as the ASQ-SE can support an understanding of social and emotional development, and use observations to guide responsive, developmentally appropriate supports for children and families. So, once we gather data and have some conclusions or informed assumptions about what's needed, how do we turn those into plans? And so that's what we'll focus on for the next bit of time. I've had these in really all of our slides just to ground us in the core principles of infant and early childhood mental health as we're thinking about this particular topic. And I'll review this one here as well. But it's everything is about relationships within this context. I think I've already said that this hour, obviously, at least a few times, and will again. That development happens in the context of family, culture, and community. And so when we're assessing development, it's important to consider that and to consider the family and cultural and community opportunities and assumptions around different developmental tasks as they vary. And so, that is important data as that we're bringing into looking at children within a given setting or task. And that we're always going to be strengths-based and prevention focused rather than more deficits or sort of needs focused within this work. And this is, again, by way of review, just the definition that we use nationally. It's been adopted by 0 to 3. It was originally published in 2005, as you can see here in this book. But it's the developing capacity of a child between infancy and 5 to do these three things. So to form close relationships, to experience, express, and tolerate a range of emotions without lasting collapse, and to allow, again, the full range of not just happy, content, and quiet, but how do I understand feelings of upset or anger or frustration and express those in a range of ways that are acceptable in the environment that I'm in, and do all of the mental math to do that, of course, which is not just a little bit of a lift, and to explore the environment and learn. And so a lot of what we're doing in observation is taking that in and drawing conclusions about what we're seeing. So as we start, just I won't make you go off of mute or share in the chat, but just wanting to give you sort of a frame to think about this as we're talking it through. Um, uh, um, Thinking about a child that you've worked with recently, and this could be in a group setting or individually, but just to, call in mind a child, and what comes first to mind? Do you remember their behavior or your relationship with them or something about your interactions? So just giving you a moment to sort of have that frame before we move forward. Um, whoop. And again, applying a relationship and sort of, again, all infant mental health is always going to be adult focused, because that's how we understand our ability to um, impact the what we're seeing within young kids and understand it. Observation is always going to begin with ourselves. So before we observe the child, we should notice and try to call ourselves out on any assumptions that we're bringing. And it could be, again, like sort of the big things that we think about in terms of like bias about male, female, racial behavior, et cetera. It can also be things like this activity didn't go well last time, so I'm assuming it's not going to go well this time with this particular child, et cetera, right? And so trying to just sort of think about assumptions and be as forgiving of them as possible. How do your experiences influence what I notice, right? And it's one of those things where like if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. So if you are prepared to see, you know, uh, defiance or withdrawal or whatever it might be, you're going to see that. But if you're also sort of aiming to look for opportunities of engagement or effort or whatever it is that you're looking for in a given task or activity with a child, you're going to notice that as well. So just trying to sort of do a self check as we're beginning observations. What emotions does this child's behavior evoke in me? So we all have those kids that feel really easy for us to sort of interact with and those kids that feel harder. Um, and so just trying to get to sort of, just do a self check or a self read on that. And how might my own regulation affect what I see? And, all of the bullets above, when I sort of talked them through, we're talking about your interaction with that particular child. The how might my own regulation affect what I see can have to do with that particular child or that group of kids that you're working with. It can also have to do with your day, your sort of things that are happening for you personally, physically, etc. Right? Did you not get a lot of sleep? Are you excited about an upcoming thing? Except like, and again, full range of regulation, positive, negative, otherwise. But how might, the way that I'm coming into this activity affect what I'm observing? And again, just more of a reflective prompt as we're thinking about this. So observation within early childhood is not about drawing quick conclusions. So it's not a quick study. It's not a quick, analysis. And then I can, sort of conclude that this is what we're working with. It's really more about how do I fully unpack, the questions and assumptions. We talked previously about the idea of like being a behavior detective. When I was working within a clinic within the Department of Psychiatry, offering mental health services to kids under 5, we would have multi-disciplinary, hour and a half long assessments when families were first coming into clinic. And we would never leave those and say, oh, we totally have a handle on what's going on. We left those with more questions than the referral came in with, but it gave us some directions, right? And so really embracing observation as you're not gonna, the goal isn't quick conclusions or quick or interpreting, I know this is happening because, but it's about how do I slow down and observe and watch for and notice maybe things that I wouldn't have if I wasn't observing with this intent or focus. Remaining curious. So again, it's about expanding the questions versus ruling out things when you're initially engaging in that. And it's because I hope I've made this case throughout the course of this sort of webinar series, but there are so many factors to consider with respect to how young kids are showing up into an environment or reacting to a task or emotion, right? And they're not super equipped yet to tell us what's happening on their behalf, right? So a lot of this is how do I sort of notice patterns? And the slowdown is very intentional, as is the sort of previous prompt about, considering your own regulation, because so much of this is dependent on us, um, really taking the time to understand, and that requires focus, and it's not the pace that we traditionally or have the opportunity to move in often. Um, I said this before in the introduction, but one thing that I hope that you walk away with from today is that relationship or observation is relationship based. And so, I always think of this as, during this time of year, some states do it or jurisdictions do it throughout the course of the summer as kids are getting registered for kindergarten. And sometimes they'll do it, or pre-K as well. And sometimes they'll do it, in the first a little bit of time. My daughter's school, and she's now in fifth grade, so this was 6 years ago, but or entering fifth grade rather. But they did the same day that you had your 15-minute slot to go in and take a peek at your seat for kindergarten and drop off all your stuff. They pulled kids to do the kindergarten readiness assessment to then plan their sort of, initial understanding of their academic and developmental needs. Why might that not be ideal? And I'm happy to let you guys answer in the chat or go off mute. But if we think about relationship observation, understanding a 4.5 or 5.5-year-old as being driven by relationships, why might within you're first walking in with your big backpack and putting something in a seat that's going to be yours in pre-K or kindergarten for the first time, going into that room for the first time, meeting that teacher for the first time, and then be pulled for an assessment, not really authentically show where that child would be developmentally, socially, academically.
You're pulling them away from their safe person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. During a time where safety might not feel super solid, right? There's, naturally, like that's a time of sort of natural, like logical anxiety for young kids, right? Versus observation that can happen over a given period in the first month or few weeks that a child is in that setting when you're getting to know them better, right? The other thing that you pointed out, thank you so much for going off mute, to say that you're pulling them away from their safe person is that their safe person can also probably give you a lot of data that would be useful as well. So, the idea, yes, you want to see the child, do certain tasks on their own, but having the opportunity to either have a checklist filled out or have a get to know my child or have a quick conversation with the parents or family members of that child can give you so much useful data, right? Um, and again, like really trying to go into this with understanding not just, so again, we'll use the kindergarten readiness assessment as an example here, but this can be at any given setting, right? But not just, okay, who's low and who would require, consideration around special education services or additional developmental needs, right? But where am I seeing strengths, right? Like, how can we build around, use this as an activity to understand kids, both their strengths, their deficits, their abilities, their things that they are drawn to, so that we can plan around them as a whole child and not just sort of see them as pegs to fill. Any other thoughts there? Well, before we jump on? Okay. And so again, like this sort of idea of observation is really about us learning, us being curious, us expanding questions, and not about drawing quick conclusions. Unfortunately, we naturally do that, right? We naturally categorize things or people, and so a lot of this is us intentionally undoing those. But you can see some examples of the difference between an observation. So Lily covered her ears during music. And judgment, Lily hates music, right? Maybe she covered her ears during music because she is on the end of a cold and getting an ear infection, right? It could have nothing to do with her feeling about the given activity, right? Mateo cried when dad left. The judgment of that is Mateo's spoiled. It could be instead, he had, a really bad, morning and night. And so this was an atypical, drop off and issue, or that he's having a longer than typical, transition into, non-tearful, goodbyes at the beginning of the class, like the class school year, but that we know that like our interpretation of how long that's supposed to last is based on an average of a group of kids, and that there's always going to be outliers there, right? So it could have nothing to do with him being spoiled or him being, um, behind developmentally, etc. Kai looked away when I spoke. Kai isn't paying attention, right? So the idea that again, like we want to hold ourselves to the observation and not to the conclusion or judgment of that, and that a lot of that has us sort of course correcting ourselves or our colleagues or those that we're working with. And wanting to, just again, practice this out a little bit further, and by way of me not just talking at you, but you guys applying this a bit, wanting to go through each of these, and you can put it in the chat or go off of mute, but would you interpret this first sentence? So Ella cried for 2 minutes after her father left, as an observation or interpretation? Seeing some things pop in the chat. Yeah. So Liz and Melissa, thank you. Annette, thank you. Observation, right? It made me think of there was Parks and Rec, which is a TV show from a while back, but Ron Swanson said, "I'm just going to state the facts," right? So it's literally you're just articulating or documenting the facts, right? Ella cried for 2 minutes after her father left. The judgment or interpretation would be Ella has separation anxiety. And again, we don't know that yet. There could be lots of reasons for that particular incident. You're gonna want a lot more data before we can conclude that. Okay, so number three, Jordan pushed another child during cleanup. Is that an observation or interpretation? Yep, you guys have it again. So that's an observation. And the interpretation you can see is the next one. So Jordan is aggressive, right? There could be, again, we need to allow, at least in the beginning, for more possible understandings of that behavior other than just aggressive. And so in infant mental health, we embrace the power of wondering, right? So part of what I hope you're getting from our time together so far this hour is that observation, if you're doing it with an infant and early childhood mental health approach, is gonna leave you in the I don't know yet phase a lot longer than what we would typically think of as an observation or assessment interpretation. So withhold conclusion. Allow ourselves sort of the power of sort of expanding up possibilities first, and gathering more data around those before we sort of settle on something. So instead of what's wrong, try what is the child communicating? What happened before this? What happened after? What relationships matter here? What strengths do I see? Right? Because there can be a lot of things that if we don't consider or sort of walk through all those things, we'll be, saying, she hates all fruit because she didn't eat the applesauce at lunch, and that's not enough data to conclude that, right? So again, just like embracing the idea of going into wondering, but not going into answers quite yet. Um, and when we think about observations in this way, and again, sort of expanding our questions or sort of going through a series of questions before we're tunneling based on data or frequency, it allows us to kind of work through many of the topics that we've gone through within this series, right? So considering attachment, so how are relationships supporting this child, or how is the lack of relationship explaining some of what we're seeing in this concern or this child's presentation today? The mantra of infant mental health is that behavior is communication, right? So what need is being expressed? It might not have done it they might not have done it in the appropriate way. The constant that I see your feeling. It's okay to have that feeling. It's not okay to share your feeling in that way. But how do we not just focus in the third part of that, which is the inappropriate response and really kind of understand first what is the need here? Um, Understanding again how trauma and resilience can influence behavior or the interactions that we're seeing. What's happening with me? How do we understand again not only just what's happening internally for this child, but her or his caregivers, family, home life. Adults will often and when I say adults, I really meant sort of family members will often sort of misinterpret positive changes or big changes in the family or in the home as impacting a child, and often they can be positive changes, right? Big brother came home from college, right, and is in the home again after being gone for months, right? That doesn't feel like something that you need to like report to a teacher or to a therapist. But how do we sort of know? Like that's a big change for someone whose life is 3 years old. And so for a big part of that, that person wasn't here. And then you're adjusting to them being back, even if you're very, very excited about it, right? So just again, like how do we gather data about caregiver well-being, any changes, positive or negative in the house? Again, of course, development comes into play here as well. And how do we understand developmental variation as it sets kids up for a given task and our interpretation of their task? Um, and the context of relationships in the early educational setting as well. So again, just applying all the topics that we've gone through already, and really thinking about, again, not just looking at like the very discrete or explicit, easy to conclude things that we would see in terms of like she was able to complete the task in the same amount of time that her peer did at the table, right? But how are we looking at regulation, relationships, emotions, communication, play, environment, and the various ways that young kids express those things? And that's not a small task. So again, this idea that behavior is communicating a range of things. I put a fairly long list here, but not exhaustive because there can always be other things. But again, our like the goal, if we look at this as the goal, not just to terminate the behavior, but to understand why the behavior is happening, because otherwise it'll bubble up in another way, right? So if we say you can't X, like you can't yell, right? Then that frustration could bubble up in a different way. Even if the yelling stops, right? Because the need is still there. So how do we observe enough so that we understand enough so that we get all the way down to the need and not just the behavior that we don't want to see? And that is where we look for patterns. So we look for data over time, right? Over time. So how are we seeing, again, not just the 10 minutes or the first time you're in a classroom, but, across time, across tasks or activities, across people, across routines, across relationships, and across settings or environments. What are we seeing as consistently happening and what feels inconsistent? And how do we use that as information about what would help this child be successful in that task? There is a phrase in early childhood called authentic assessment, and it's a specific term for a reason. And here's just a great example of this. And then she talks through kind of what she's observing for a little bit. So I'll play this video and let you all watch.
My name is Janine Chapdelaine. I'm a preschool teacher at the University of Hartford Magnet School. I work with a class of 19 children, 3s and 4s combined. Half the class is 3-year-olds, half the class 4-year-olds. Today's small group lesson was a math lesson, and I focused on cardinality, holding a number in your head, and adding on to a set of objects. I used dice and small blocks so that they could create something that they were interested in, so that it was hands-on, because pre-K really needs to be hands-on. And so I made my own dice out of gift boxes so that they could actually touch the dots on the dice themselves.
Let's see what Coy rolls. And Scott, I'm going to ask you to check Coy's counting, okay? You'll be the checker. Go ahead, Coy. Whoa! Coy, can you count all those dots? Scott, would you like to come over so you can be closer? Right over here? Keep counting, Coy.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
7, 8, 9. How many blocks do you need, Coy? 9. Okay, Scott, I want you to double check and make sure Coy really needs 9. The dice are going to tell Coy how many to get. Let's see. How many do you need to get, Coy?
Look at my
3.
No!
Get 3.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And add them to your blocks, and then tell me how many there are now. Now start counting, Coy. How many now?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12.
It's very important to me if I'm gathering data on children, that I'm gathering it through play and through hands-on activities, because I think that's how 3 and 4-year-old children learn best. I want to avoid pulling them one by one and asking them to count, a set of bears for me whenever possible. So I will create small group lessons where their hands are on the objects, or I make a game out of it. So it's fun learning and they're invested in it.
5 down. Okay. Now you have 5. Reach in the box. You have 5, so you're going to go
5.
6.
The key for me with embedding assessment is having a little assessment tool ready to go ahead of time. So every time I make a small group lesson plan, I just add an assessment piece. Sometimes it's a table with a place for their name and the 3 standards I might be looking for. I think using 3 standards is doable. Any more than that, and I'm going to lose data. I'll even put little questions to myself at the top, like ask, how many do you have now? So I'm remembering the language I'm going to be sticking with. And then I'll quickly write during the lesson. I've explained to the kids at the beginning of the year with small group that you'll see me with a clipboard and I'm writing down all the great things that you're doing so that I know what I can do with you next, that it helps me, so that they're not feeling evaluated but more complimented. I take that data and I try to make sure that I get at least 3 observations on each standard per child, because before I do the formal assessment, before I take the data and make it formal on the profile card. Because I know that sometimes you get distracted as a child. Sometimes you're not on that day. So I really want to make sure it's not just a one-shot capture.
4.
5. 6. 11.
7. 8. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. So how many blocks do you need, Scott?
One thing that came up that surprised and delighted me was there's one child in the group who pretty consistently says 11 for number 7. So I modeled it a few times in the group when he was counting. I counted with him. I joined in his counting a few times when he was getting close to that number. And then at the end, almost at the end of the small group, he counted 7 on his own, said the correct number name, and added it on to a set that was already there. So I thought that was definitely in his own brain now. He infused it. I'm just really impressed by that.
1.
Close.
Go ahead. 3. 4. This one is 5. 6.
Down.
No! And this one is, what comes after 6? 7. Yes.
Anything that stood out to you all from that video? Happy to read out what you put in the chat or have you guys go off of mute. As you're perhaps typing or thinking, I'll just point out that she really intentionally made the assessment feel very natural and play-based, and even said that she's not pulling kids in the hallway and saying count 1 to 11 for me, right? So that it doesn't feel like they're any of the sort of test anxiety equivalent that you'd see in preschool. And again, this is an educational setting, but it would be the same if you were trying to understand a child within a mental health setting or other setting as well. Hmm. Yeah, so Elizabeth, thanks. I like that she explained what she was doing with the notes, not to allow them to feel judged. She knew her strength, 3 standards to capture an idea data accurately. Yeah, and again, we'll talk about this a bit as well, but just once you're looking for something like really simple ways to sort of track data over time. And the other thing, I think the other sort of final thing that's worth highlighting in what she did there was she referenced the one child that kept on saying, was it 7 instead of 11 or 11 instead of 7? And then she, instead of saying, oh, that's where he is, that's where I'm scoring him, she was able to incorporate some teaching and then noted that he incorporated that, right? So again, it's seeing how children can build on what you're doing, and not just assessing where they are and leaving it at that. Okay, so now we get into the idea of observation versus assessment. So observations are typically or hopefully ongoing, and again, really relationship based in sort of familiar activities or settings or tasks for a child. Assessments can be more structured or standardized, and provide additional information, especially when there are particular questions or information needed. And together they create a fuller picture, right? So the observation is giving you more of the sort of typical or over time, or how do things look on a child's engagement in a given activity, or after a long holiday break, et cetera, versus assessments, which are typically a particular, more structured event. And when we think about assessments in early childhood with respect to social emotional needs or behavior, the most commonly used is the ASQ-SE. So Ages and Stages Questionnaire, Social Emotional 2 is just the second edition. So this is published by Brooks. I'm going to share a video from them in just a minute. But you can see on the right, it looks at different behavioral areas. So the ASQ is the most commonly used, just sort of global developmental screener, often used in educational settings, and it's recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics to use at a range of, all of the sort of well child visits to just track. It does a great job of both tracking and predicting for families, and then therefore also their primary care providers and educators, just where kids are on the typical range of development. So it looks at self-help, it looks at communication, gross motor, fine motor, etc. The SE, or social emotional 2, is a version of that is looking specifically at social emotional things. So the different domains are here. You can see autonomy, or their ability to do things themselves, compliance, so their ability or their frequent ability or infrequent ability to understand and go with instructions, or in a given setting or from a different person, adaptive functioning, and so that's a bit of their problem solving, self-regulation, so their ability to regulate themselves for a given task, their affect, how are they presenting with respect to sort of mood or emotions overall, social communication, so their ability to label and express emotion in self and others, and then interaction. So what is their interactions with peers, with adults, with new settings, et cetera, look like? And again, just because it's good to, again, use this sort of global sort of relationship-based data that is often in early childhood more meaningful because it's so dependent on relationships, and also a little more gray because it's so relationship-based. This is a very subjective, checklist where you're going through things, but it's a great tool. It typically takes around 15 minutes to fill out, and very easy to score, that allows again, whoever's working with the child and the family themselves, to get a sense of where is my child within these things? How do I get a sense of, oh, should they be doing this task by this time? And this is a quick video from the Brooks team when they published the SE2 on it.
Social emotional development is important for young children because it's really a key to success in school, in social environments, in environments both at home and away from home. It's really kind of the best predictor that we have of academic success also. Early identification really is the key to optimal development. So if we want children to develop at their utmost capacity, we need to find problems early. The Ages and Stages Social Emotional is a series of 9 questionnaires now that parents would complete at about 6-month intervals. It's a series of questions. It varies by the age of the child, and the questions are all targeted at that child's developmental level. The parent has 3 options, whether the child's kind of always doing the behavior, sometimes, or rarely or never. And some behaviors are positive that you want the child to be doing, such as having meal times be happy, playing with other friends, or there might be negative behaviors such as having difficulty with transitions or having tantrums that last, a long time. By looking at these social emotional skills, by really keying in to how the child is interacting with their environment, then we can catch delays or problems or even challenges for families early on and do something about it.
Brooks Publishing is really committed to developing content that helps people meet their full potential. And obviously, a product like ASQ really fits right in with that mission. The reason that parents really like ASQ is because it's not scary. It asks normal things about what children do, and it asks it in a warm, positive way. We're really excited about the changes in ASQ-SE too.
We looked at a new sample. So we collected about 16,000 questionnaires looking across the ages from 1 month all the way up. Now the upper age range is now 72 months. So we can look all the way up to 6 years. And we've updated the cutoff scores and the new monitoring zone so that hopefully these will be very accurate and effective as a screening system. Our goal is to make something that you don't have to be a professional to administer. We really want to make it user-friendly. I would say it's exciting to be able to revise it. It's exciting to have our colleagues at Brooks who are willing to kind of work with us and improve the layout and improve how families can use it.
I don't think there's anyone who works at Brooks Publishing who doesn't feel great that we're the publisher of ASQ. To really feel like you're working on something that will change people's lives is amazing.
I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to work on this project that really has helped people around the world. It's truly an honor to be involved in this.
Has anybody had experience with the ASQ-SE or questions about it? Okay. Just wanted to pause in case anybody did. Again, I picked it. There's a couple of different screeners, and you can get into all of that. I'm happy to answer any questions that people have later or offline about that. But it is the most universally used, and again, really used with the idea of supporting parents to give information. Thanks, Courtney. And then, would be remiss if we didn't say this explicitly, but not only are families really important to, give you meaningful data about, whatever it is that you're trying to assess specifically with a given child, but the importance of really sort of partnering with them understanding their understanding and understanding what works in a given setting, how consistent is what you're seeing in a setting with what they're seeing within home or community-based activities. Again, just part of the contributor of data to understand the child, and also obviously part of the important sort of partner or sort of co-author of any kind of plan that comes out of it, which is the next slide. So we don't only want to gather data so that we can internally understand the child in front of us, right? But it should inform what we're doing, right? So whenever there is a need, we should plan around it, and hanging on the strengths-based approach as well. When we understand a child's strengths, how do we sort of plan around those as well? So how do we not just look at what isn't working and sort of microanalyze that, but look at what part of the day is easiest for this child within a given setting or within their home, within their morning or whatever it might be. And how do we use that to inform our plan as well? It can often be a lot more freeing to study what's working versus study what's not. I can give you some ideas about, oh, well, if they like, Bluey, how do we use that as an incentive to get through the teeth brushing, which they have some sensory issues with, and so it becomes a tug of war as a task, right, or whatever it might be. So how do we use that data as well? But thinking about how do we use that to inform the environment, the specific task. Individualized responsive support. So this idea that all kids at a given chronological age are going to be able to do the same thing in the same way for the same amount of time and have the same results is not realistic, right? And so the more that we anchor ourselves in a developmental lens, the more that we can look at when we think about individualized responsive supports, how do we allow for that child to sort of be successful in an activity in a range of ways that's going to set them up for success, not compare them to their peer? So maybe they're not yet, blending colors, but they are, drawing a straight line, right? Or whatever it might be. Just trying to think of examples, but, again, like trying to sort of set themselves up, or what do they need to be successful with that task? Are they going to need, a peer to sort of partner with them and guide them through it? Or are they going to need, an adult, some more explicit instruction, et cetera? Um, uh, yeah, thank you, Annette. So child's interest in train cars to mark tasks during potty training. Yeah, exactly. So a great example of just not only looking at what side of the data looks like not where we want it to be, but how do we understand what's going to incentivize and excite that child? And even in the authentic assessment video, like she talked about, like she created dice to teach about numbers out of boxes so that the children could not just be told it and sat there, right? But touch it, feel it, interact with it, right? So how do you use something that's going to incentivize the child based on what we know individually about them in creative ways to help them through that activity? How do we have stronger family partnerships in reporting, in sharing what's working well so that they can try that at home as well, vice versa, et cetera. Yeah, to make referrals when appropriate. So, that's an important part of any of this assessment data. If we are interpreting that, there is a need based on, development of speech, whatever it might be, how do we make sure that is planned around, and then to use it for reflective practice. And part of what's important there is to acknowledge that behavior change takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. And so the more that we're able to sort of assess and use data. Like, so maybe, a child who is eloping from a given task and refusing to do it 7 days a week, it's not going to go from that to nothing. But how do we measure, like, okay, they tolerated that task for a longer amount of time this time, right? Or they actually came back after eloping with like on their own without, a one-on-one individual support from a teacher or whatever it might be. So just trying to think about, how do we use our sort of assessments and observation periods as an opportunity to kind of reflect on what's working as well. Oh, participation was a trip to the train museum. So that's a great big thing to earn, and also like a really positive connection between your work with them and a parent activity. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Annette. And then just to close with a final thought. So a lot of times when we're trying to understand behavior, especially behavior that's not going well, adults can be really poor reporters. It's all bad all the time, right? And so how do we kind of use observations as an opportunity to really dig into this perspective of more deeply understanding the child. So engaging, it's not a separate skill or activity, but it's the integration of our knowledge, our curiosity and relationships to better, meet the needs of that child in that setting for that task. And so it's important work. And again, it's sort of the blend of both the art of like being curious and being and sort of seeing trends or opportunities, and oh, that's a little glimmer of a thing that I can build on the child's interest in trains or whatever it might be, and also sort of some of the harder science around. This is a document that says where a child would be developmentally, and how do we understand whether or not they're at that spot. And so it's the art and the data together. I'm just going to attend the chat as well. Um, with my child in the developmental disability world, I always asked the teacher what they were working on so that I could back it up. Simple notes and in-person conversations, it helps. That's great, Melissa. And hopefully we're getting to a spot where it's not just on you as the family to ask, but that, if something is going well, or if they're working on a particular task, that there is the home companion of that within the setting. We know that that's going to help the child be more successful on the task in the classroom. That's going to help with cohesion, so that there's the same effort, and that's going to help the child with that task at home. So, thank you for sharing that. And Haley will send, by way of follow-up, the evaluation. Always open to any feedback, but that is the conclusion of our topic for today. So it looks like we all get back about 5 minutes of our time. I'm happy to hang on if people have any questions, but thank you so much for the opportunity to talk this through with you today and for joining in the chat and unmuting. Thanks all. Have a great, I was going to say rest of July, but our next one is July 22nd. So we'll see you in a little bit.